بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. Welcome everybody to this Women's Fiqh and Health Masterclass. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to have you, and I'm glad to be here with our dear sister Chantel Blake. And she has so much knowledge when it comes to holistic, fixing your period or getting it more closer to the natural way, which is, mashallah, what we've learned from her is it can be really peaceful. So inshallah, I look forward to bringing her on. So the first part of this the talk, I'm going to be covering some fiqh rulings, inshallah. So that is my part, and we'll get started with that, and then inshallah we'll hear from Sister Chantel. We can take some of your questions and then hear from Sister Chantel too, inshallah. So bismillah. So I'm going to give a overview of some of just the basic rulings of fiqh. And so the first thing we have to talk about is blood and purity maximum and minimums. What is the maximum time you can bleed, and what is the minimum time? Or, it can't be, you can't be bleeding all the time, right? There's like, or even if you are, you can't be, I hope you're not, but you can't be leaving prayer for more than a certain amount of time. And there was a woman from from amongst the Sahabiyat. She had constant bleeding, and she asked the Prophet ﷺ about that, and she said, "Do I leave prayer?" And he said, "No, this is a vein." Or something, so he said it wasn't the period blood, but he said, so leave the prayer on the days that you used to leave prayer when it was normal. So the first thing is to know, when is our maximum and minimum blood. So according to so I wanted to make it inclusive. I usually teach Hanafi fiqh, but alhamdulillah, I have studied the other madhahib as well. So for purity, there's no maximum. So you can have a longer purity and then, see blood afterwards, which is the case for some of the sisters, for women for girls who have just started their period, that can happen. They have a period and then they can go, a month or two without seeing anything. And then also for our women that are in the perimenopause stage, which, as a side note, the Sister Chantel is doing a class on peaceful perimenopause. Inshallah, she can share the information with us, inshallah. So, so there's a lot, you can have long times without seeing anything, and then you do get a period. So in terms of what does that mean for your prayer? There's no purity maximum, like you can't have more than this amount of purity, right? Whereas for there is a purity minimum, meaning you have to have these many days at least to have another period. Okay, the purity minimum, what it means is that you have to have, 15 days. So if you had your period and you ended your period, you have to have at least 15 days of purity, at least 15 days of prayer until you get another period, and then you have to stop praying again. Okay, so this is 15 days across all the schools. Now, the period minimum, your blood minimum, is 3 days, according to Hanafi, meaning what is the minimum amount that that makes a period? Okay, so the minimum amount that makes a period, according to Hanafi, is 3 days. And what that means is that if you had just like spotting for 1 day and it stopped, that would not count as a period just then. It could count at a period. It depends. If you see it again come tomorrow, then that's day 2. If it comes again day 3, then it's 3 days. You get it? But at that point, if you saw spotting and it stopped, what does it mean that it's not your period? What happens if, okay, the spotting was not my period? What does it mean practically for you to do? Who can tell me what are the repercussions of that? Because what are we doing here? Why does it matter when our period starts, when it ends? What's the point of it? You have to right, exactly. It's for prayer and fasting and things like that, right? So a lot of things, a lot of things. So if that was your if that wasn't your period, then you have to keep praying, right? Uh, and obviously, if it is your period, you wait until the blood is over. Sister Sajida is saying that I heard you have to wait 3 days until it's clear to confirm it wasn't period bleeding. That is wrong according to all the madhabs. It's wrong according to every single school, every school of fiqh. It's wrong. And that's why it's very important to study with qualified teachers, just because there's a lot of misconceptions. You wouldn't believe it that goes around period fiqh. So, okay. Going back to this, so the period minimum according to Hanafi. So if you're a Hanafi, that's 3 days. If you're a Shafi'i, it's 1 day. And if you're Maliki, it's just a gush. So a gush will be your period. So what happens if you see spotting according to Maliki and it stops? It's a little bit different than, obviously it's going to be different than Hanafi and the Shafi, but if it's, if you just see spotting, that was considered your period, but if it stops, you have to make a ghusl and pray, because that was considered your period. Whereas Hanafi, would you have to do a ghusl if you just saw spotting and it stopped? No, because it's not considered your period, right? Okay. So the period maximum is, again, so the period maximum, what does that mean? So this is the maximum amount of days that you can have your period, or when it comes to fiqh, a lot of it is like geared towards how much can you pray, or how many times can you, or for how many days can you miss prayer? Okay, so when we think about period maximum, that's what we're kind of doing practically. How many days can you miss prayer? So in Hanafi, the maximum amount of time in one go you can miss prayer is 10 days. For the Shafi, it's 15 days. And for the Malikis, it's basically whatever your last habit was, you add 3 days, but in general, 15 days is the max that you can ever have, right? But it doesn't happen like right away, like at the Shafi. Okay, you see blood on day 13, day 14, you just wait it out. According to Maliki, if your last blood was 7 days, if your last habit was 7 days, and now you're in day 9, could that be, is that possible for you to, is that possible for that to be your blood? If your habit was 7. Yes. If your habit was 7 and now it's day 11, and this time was day 11, no. So you see how it differs. So that's why I didn't say, 15-day max, right? It depends on what happened previously. Okay. This is the first time, or the first time was with when I did the talk with Sister Chantel, but this is the first time I'm kind of teaching fiqh like this, because you used to be against my principles because it could be confusing. I mean, I always recommend women to learn just one madhab. It's easier because otherwise it's like an overwhelming amount of information and you'll get confused. Like I won't be surprised if some of you go back and you're like, oh, wait a second, was it this for the Hanafi or this for the Shafi? It gets confusing. But I'm doing it because we have like the audience, I don't know, can be from any of these schools. So mashallah. So the colors of blood, it's important. This is very important to remember that every color is blood. Every color can be blood according to fiqh. Okay, every color can be blood. So every color except white, clear, or light cream is considered blood. So dark yellow, light pink, rose, like grayish, brown, all these colors or discharges, they're considered period blood. Okay, so if you have discharge that's like this, colored, that would be considered period blood. You have to kind of write that down as your period. Okay, and then you relate it back to the maximum period and the minimum period, that all the rules of regular blood apply. I don't know where the concept of having to wait 3 days comes from. I have no idea. It probably comes from that the minimum is and the Hanafi is 3 days. And they're like, oh, it's just bad fiqh. It's bad fiqh. It's can you guys?
You're muted now, though.
Why does it say my audio? It says something weird is happening with my audio. But you guys are okay? Okay, alhamdulillah. So yeah, I would just say it's bad fiqh. And then somebody like misinterprets something in the Hanafi school or in another school, and then people run with it. You know, I know even I know that in when I was in Syria, that one of my teachers, her her mother-in-law was a like a teacher, and she was telling me when so I was teaching them Hanafi, the Hayl of Hanafi fiqh, and I remember her
Your
like,
sound went out for a little bit. Oh, it's coming back now.
oh, this is really weird. This is the first time it's happened. Okay, I hope it's going to be okay now. I don't know. SubhanAllah. So yeah, so she says that a lot of her after I taught them some of the rulings, she said she realizes like all of her like the answers or the fatwa she gives were wrong, because there was an understanding that was incorrect, and they just basically kept on teaching with that wrong understanding. So it's not something that just happens with, as I said, it happened in Syria with one of my with a family that is very into knowledge. Like the father was a sheikh, the husband is a sheikh, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a family of knowledge, but still that they have this big mistake there. So I would say that these 3 days would probably, the issue with the 3 days comes from there's a minimum of 3 days in the Hanafi. And so they're like, oh, it could still be your period, so let's just wait until 3 days. No, but that's not the rule in the Hanafi madhab. If the rule is that if it stops, you have to start praying and fasting. Okay, so yeah, we did the colors of blood. Now spotting. So this is a big part of this is where all the questions come in, a lot about spotting. If you can kind of understand these concepts, inshallah, you'll understand what to do. So according to the Hanafi school, spotting after 15 days of purity, if you've had your last period and it ended, khalas, it's good. And then you've had 50, at least the minimum 15 days of purity, and then you start spotting then all spotting, I'm giving like the general opinion, a general ruling that all blood or spotting after 15 days of bleeding, it can be your period, right? So it's possible that this blood or spot, the reason why I say it like that is because it depends what's going to happen with that period. If it goes over 10 days, then we have to reassess. But that at this point, practically, after 15 days of purity, all blood or spotting is your period, okay? Within what that sticks within 10 days. So the spotting that is before 15 days purity, what happens? So you had a period, it ended, and then after a week you had spotting. The answer to that is you have to contact a specialist. There's no easy answer. Um, the specialist basically will look at your previous purity and blood logs for the last several months to determine what part of that bleeding is menstruation and what part is wrong blood. So it gets tricky in the Hanafi madhab for sure. But basically, so if you have spotting, and it's within you had a period, like say you had a 5 day, 7 day period, you ended it, and then you took ghusl, and then you see spotting again after a week or so, you should contact a specialist and find out, they can give you a plan. If you want to go with the Hanafi, you can go with the Hanafi. What I usually do, I'll offer the if you have an issue like this, I'll let you know what it is according to Hanafi, what it is according to the other madhabs, and see what is more practical, because sometimes it can get tricky with just sticking to one madhab. It is possible, for example, in the Hanafi madhab, that you can actually have your period on the days that you are not seeing blood. That is a possibility, because if you see, for example, if you had spotting one day, no spotting the other day, and spotting again, you see, this is all considered blood. All the 3 days are considered blood, right? So a day of spotting, a day of no spotting, and a day of spotting again, all 3 days. But this day you didn't see any blood, but still, because it's between days of blood, that's still considered blood, and that's the understanding in the Hanafi school. However, I mean, I gave you a simple example, but it can be more, it may be even more difficult than that for certain women. So it depends. So this number two is the answer to that is just you contact a specialist. Okay. So spotting in the according to the different schools. So if it's, as I said, if it's before blood is before 15 days of purity, for the Hanafi, you consult a specialist. The Shafi'i and the Maliki are pretty straightforward. You just complete 15 days of purity, and then you stop praying. So there is a little bit more detail to that. It's not just you always complete 15 days of purity. Why? Because I'll give you an example. Okay, so say you finished your period, you had a 5 day period, and it stopped, and you take a ghusl, and then after a week, you get spotting again. So what happens? Yeah, we have to do a little bit of math. Fiqh is hard. I mean, menstruation fiqh, it's complicated. I'm hoping I'm not making it too complicated, but I just want to show you that I'm giving you guys a general understanding, but there are a lot of these like um, little exceptions that are important and should be studied. Okay. Um, exactly, Aisha. Thank you. So five days of period, and then after a week, 7 days, you see spotting again. That's 12 days. So it's still within the period days. Okay, so that's that's like the catch. So it's not just like, oh, you see spotting after a week, and so now you have to just wait. So just make it, start, give yourself another week of purity or another 8 days of purity, and then you stop praying. No, so it depends. Does that spotting fall within 15 days of your period or afterwards, etc.? Okay, so that's something to be mindful of. Okay, so Maliki, likewise, there's some details in the Maliki, how they count the blood, which is important. Okay, how they count the days of blood. Okay, so in the Hanafi, if you see blood after 15 days of purity, as I said, it will be your period up to 10 days. Anything, that's within 10 days or within that would be your period. There is more, explanation for that, but not in, this kind of short time that we have. So in the Shafi, after 15 days as well, it's your period, um, up to 15 days, up to 15 days max, and then as well as in the Maliki. So basically, if you've had a 15-day purity, according to everybody, you're able to have a period. Okay. So it's just the issue, of course, comes when it's before a 15-day purity, when you're having spotting in what they call spotting in between your periods, right? What do you do when you spot in between your periods? You never have a complete purity. So for the Hanafi, it's quite complicated. You have to consult a specialist. For the Shafi, okay, with all those details, you do need to complete 15 days, and Maliki, you need to complete 15 days as well. Okay. Okay, so spotting during your period time. If you're spotting during your period time and you have a habit, wait for your habit. Okay, so this is actually a Shafi'i ruling. Okay. Um, Meaning what? So this is something that you can do you can use if you can have like a consistent spotting, habit. For example, you always get 1 day of spotting, then 3 days of purity, then 5 days of bleeding, or, like the other example I gave, 1 day of spotting and then 1 day of nothing, 1 day of purity, or 1 day of clear, and then your bleeding starts, right? There's a lot of women who have a little bit of spotting and they see like a little bit of nothing, and then their period actually starts after that. So in all these cases, all the days, including the 3 days of purity, are period. So this is not this is according to Hanafi and Shafi. Like I said, this is not according to the Maliki. They don't count the 3 days of purity as period. Okay. So if you're Hanafi and Shafi, you can follow this. um, so uh, there's specifics here. I don't want to say all of it is Hanafi and Shafi, but so this part here where you add all the days, then you get 5 days of bleeding. So you add the day one, you have spotting, right? The example here is day one, you have spotting, 3 days without any bleeding. Okay, these 3 days, no bleeding. And then you have 5 more days of spotting. Okay, so what do is just you add up all of those days. So 1 plus 3 plus 5 is 9 days of period. It's like technically you've bled for 9 days. Okay, see, in the fiqh, even those 3 days are going to be considered blood days. Okay, so the ruling that, if in Hanafi as well, yes, definitely in Hanafi as well. Those are ruling of blood days. Now, if you have a habit of spotting, you can take the ruling that, you can wait for your habit. In the Hanafi, you would, as I mentioned, that it's the ruling is that you should, if you're not seeing anything, you start praying. In the Shafi, that you can wait for your habit. Okay, so say this happens to you every month. So that first day you see bleeding, and then 3 days you don't see anything, and then the blood comes back. In the Shafi, you can wait those 3 days that you don't see anything, you can wait it out. Like you don't have to start praying and fasting in those days. And the Hanafi, you do, right? So that's different. But all of them say both of them say that this is going to be 9 days of period. When it comes back, everybody's like, okay, that's your period again. You know, everybody says that. But in terms of waiting it out, these 3 days, do you wait or do you pray? In the Shafi'i, they said you can wait. So if it's something that you experience often, it could be, what does it mean? Wait for your habit. That's what it means. You see what it means? Like you don't start praying and fasting in these 3 days where you're not saying anything, but you just wait until when the blood comes again, you're like, it's considered all your period, right? So even those 3 days that you haven't seen anything, it's your period, right? I have a question here. If we wait and there's no blood, do we have to perform qada for namaz? Yes. So if it actually never comes back, like you expect it to come back, but it didn't come back after 3 days, you have to make up those 3 days that you waited because that was your habit. You're not waiting it out just to wait out like the 3 day rule. Okay, I just used 3 days of purity here because that was something random. It could be 1 day of purity, it could be 5 days of purity. It could be so if it's your habit that this happens, then you wait for your habit. Okay. And this is according to Shafi, but uh so yes, that's what I'm saying, that you can take this ruling even as a Hanafi. And this is something that previously I wouldn't teach it like this, but recently just what year are we? 24. Yeah. This earlier this year when I spoke when Sheikh Samir had come actually in the last year. So it was in December, January, the trip. I spoke to him about it, and he basically he's of the opinion, and that's what I follow, that it's just, especially in these situations with menstruation, it can be so difficult. And he knows because he's a Hanafi, and I know because I teach Hanafi fiqh. So basically to follow another opinion is not that's what he would do. He mentions that, give people another opinion, even if they follow the Hanafi school or the Shafi'i school, to give them another opinion from another school that they can follow, just to make life easier. And inshallah, that's allowed to do. Yeah, I would say so. That's how I started teaching it now. Let me see, do I have any more slides? I just kind of stopped there. Okay, I do have some slides here. I have a question from Beatrice. How do you choose a madhab? You choose a madhab with whatever is most accessible to you. So whatever you have more access to, you choose a madhab. Like I personally actually changed madhabs a couple of times. First I tried to be Hanafi, but I didn't have any or I couldn't find any teachers And then there was like a Shafi fiqh class going on. And then so I studied like Al-Maqasid, which is a book in Shafi fiqh, a small book by Imam Nawawi in Shafi fiqh. So I studied that, and so I became Shafi. And then I found a Hanafi Mufti who was ready to teach like a lot more detail in a Hanafi fiqh. And I studied Nur al-Idah, and I studied, a lot like more text, Arabic text. So I became Hanafi again. And I haven't looked back since. You know how some people say that. Not in a bad way, but astaghfirullah. Mashallah. Um, okay. Sister Rosina is saying that she follows Hanafi fiqh because of, okay, adenomyosis and PCOS, bleeding daily. Yeah, Latif. Yeah, so when it's that, the Hanafi fiqh it can be easier on those days in terms of, in a sense that it gives you, you know exactly when you're supposed to pray and when you're not supposed to pray. Otherwise, in the Shafi'i madhab, and you do have in the Shafi'i, uh, you have tamyiz, which is differentiation between heavy bleeding and light bleeding. And so when you have extended periods of bleeding, they only count the heavy bleeding as your period, and the lighter bleeding will not be your period, which again, I do feel like it's more practical and more intuitive for women. So if it depends on what their situation is, I'll give them that fatwa if they need. Okay, so I'll continue with this. I have like 5 more minutes. Then I want to give the mic to Sister Chantel because I know she always have so many gems. Um, so basically here, yeah, so the last point was you make wudu or ghusl when the bleeding stops. Okay, so when the bleeding stops completely, meaning after 9 days. Okay, after 9 days. So if this is like the easier opinion, that if it's something that happens regularly, you don't have to constantly, after every single spotting, make ghusl or make wudu and start praying. But if it's something that is a habit for you, you always see like a day of spotting and then your period starts, or a day of like on and off bleeding. If that's a habit. If you don't have a habit, you will have to pray every time the bleeding stops. Okay, if you don't have a habit. So bleeding over the max. Mm, I have so many questions here. I really want to get to them. Inshallah, let me finish this and I'll try to get to them. Okay. Um, where are we? So bleeding over period max. Bleeding or spotting more than the maximum. If you have more than 10 days bleeding in the Hanafi, you consult a specialist. In the Shafi, you use a differentiation of blood if possible. If not, then you go back to a habit. If not, like your last habit. If not, then blood after the max, after 15 days is wrong blood. So it's much more easier. Whereas, see, in the Hanafi, you don't go back to your last habit. I call it a legal habit, which the specialist has to determine what your habit is, and that usually takes months, going back to your several months of blood logs and purity logs to determine that. Whereas the Shafi, much more straightforward. If you have heavy bleeding and light bleeding, you just count the heavy blood as your period. Again, any of these rulings you want to take, please really go and study a class because there are like details and nuances. This is just a general idea. I'm giving you guys a general idea of what you do. And so have it, but don't like, know what to do from this class. know what to do from a regular fiqh class where you actually go study the fiqh from the Shafi, from Maliki, etc. But I'm just giving you ideas of examples of what happened, what the other madhahib do if you are a Hanafi who's really struggling and you can't consult a specialist every single month because it's just difficult, then you may consider going using another madhab, and using Shafi fiqh, for example, which I recommend for a lot of women if you're having a lot of issues, just because it's much easier to figure it out yourself. So again, the Shafis, you use blood differentiation if possible. If not, like for example, you have long periods of heavy bleeding, like 20 days, somebody has those issues of like 20 days of heavy blood. It's all heavy blood. So you can't use differentiation because there is none there. So then you go back to your habit. What was the last right habit that you had? Like the last time you had a blood, it was 10 days, it was 5 days, or whatever it was, then you use that. So everything after 5 days is wrong blood. Okay. Or if you don't even have a habit, then what you do is everything after the max, which is 15 days, is wrong blood. Okay. Maliki as well, everything after the maximum period is wrong blood, or istihala. Okay, so Shafi period. Oh, I have another slide for this. I didn't even know. Okay. Differentiation, or I forgot. Differentiation of blood to means strong blood is equal, like thick and dark. So if your strong blood is 15 days or under, then only strong blood is your period. And light blood or spotting is not period. It is istihala, or wrong blood. So as I mentioned, so if you had, for example, more than 15 days of strong blood, then you can't use, that's when you cannot use differentiation, right? It has to be, the strong blood has to be 15 days or under. Habit is the last number of days your period was 15 days or under. So example, it was 10 days last time. So the first 10 days of this bleed, which went over 15 days, the first 10 days of that will be your period. And then everything after is wrong blood. This, trust me, this is much more easier than the Hanafis, which it's not the first 10 days. It could be the middle 10 days, or it could be the end 10 days, or it could be the end 7 days. So it's the Hanafi, you have to consult a specialist. But the Shafi'i is a little bit more, straightforward. Okay, so in general, one thing I would recommend everybody here, for all women, write down when your blood starts and stops. It will be much more easier to figure out if you go to a teacher, a specialist. They can help you so much more easily when you have like blood logs. Okay, so this is the day when you're spotting, you had spotting on this day. Your period started on this day, it ended on this day. If you write it down, it will be much easier to help you. Okay. And this is actually from things for menopause, because we were talking about perimenopause last time. So, a lot of them will be having spotting because of perimenopause. And so, leading to menopause. And that is just, this is a new chapter in her life. And inshallah, Sister Chantel will tell us about her class, which is amazing. I've listened to a couple of classes, but just haven't caught up. But inshallah, she can tell you. Now, I'm just going to take a few questions. I feel like our time is coming to a close. There's so many good questions here that I really want to get to them. Let's see. However, I was told in Shafi, you can't read Quran on period, which is very inconvenient for classes. Weird reading. Bismillah. Well, see, this is the thing. One thing that I understood before I went to study was that, yeah, you have to follow a madhab strictly. But as I studied more, I was just telling this to somebody yesterday. I was like, when you first start studying, you're very, you're much more strict. But now, alhamdulillah, bifadlillahi ta'ala, I'm coming into my like third decade of like teaching and studying. And I'm like, you know, you can just see there's so much more ease than what we understood. And like, yeah, even I did teach when I was young, but as I get older, I would probably recommend people to study with teachers who have that long experience because they can give you more of the ease, because hopefully if they've been exposed to it, because once you get to that point where you've studied like so many, like if you went beyond like just the basics, and you get to see that there's a lot more flexibility than we used to think. So this is one of those points where, for example, even I've seen Sheikh Samir being asked like, Hafidhullah, I've been, oh, I want to like, can I read Quran during my period? And he just says, well, the opinion in the Maliki, you can. And so somebody like, she keeps asking me, well, can I take that? So it's up to you. Basically, it's up to you. If you want to take it, because it doesn't mix with anything else. So if you want to take the Maliki opinion, of course, go back to them for like the adab in terms of, like when you can carry the Quran. When it comes to carrying the Quran, you can also carry the Quran if you're studying it while you're studying it without your wudu, but that's, another thing. So, yeah, if somebody is, for example, like memorizing Quran, wouldn't necessarily say for the awrad, because if you're doing awrad, you just skip over the Quranic parts. But if you're memorizing, if you're in a hifz school, impossible, like not impossible, it's very hard to take a 2-week break from Quran. It's very hard. It's going to basically put you back a long time. So you kind of have to be Maliki. So in the Shafi school, all the days of purity, those have to be made up. Prayer fast. No, you don't have to make up your prayers ever. In no school, you don't have to make up your prayers. You have to make up your fasting. Beatrice says, those around me don't know their madhab, and my husband doesn't follow a madhab, so I'm super confused. A lot of people don't follow like a madhab. It's easier to follow madhab in terms of if they don't follow madhab because they follow like another uh ideology, um, which I totally disagree with, because everybody needs to follow an imam. Like you don't have to, if you don't follow like one madhab strictly, you do need to follow like your opinions. The fiqh that you follow has to be within the 4 schools of thought. This is this is sunnah. This is not sunnah, but Sunni Islam. That you follow the 4 madhabs. This has been in our tradition for the last, 15 centuries, okay, not the 15 centuries, like the last 13 centuries. So this is what's known. This is the ma'ruf of our ummah. This is the ma'ruf of our ummah. Now, if to follow just like your local imam's fiqh, you know why that's wrong. You go to if your local imam is teaching a specific type of fiqh, which is not Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, or Hanbali, you follow that fiqh, you go to anywhere else, they're going to be like, what are you doing? Whereas if you follow Hanafi, Shafi, you go to anywhere in the world, everybody understands what you're doing because you're part of the ummah. You're basically you either follow like one person, your local imam, or you follow a huge group. And that's what is the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in his hadith, to follow a sawad al-a'zam, stick to the big group. Okay. Oh, oh my goodness. Let me see how many questions here. What does one do if they make ghusl after seeing white discharge? Then a few hours later, they see white mixed with pink. Do they make ghusl again? You make ghusl again, yes, because pink is part of blood. So your period did not end at that time. When you thought it ended, it hadn't ended. Is a special considered doctor? No, a special is not considered a doctor. That's a good question. Just someone who is qualified in fiqh. When it comes to your fiqh, when it comes to praying and fasting, you go to somebody who, like a faqih, a specialist in terms of the fiqh, not a doctor. For writing down blood, best to note date, time, and color of blood. Anything else that may be good to note? Date, time, and color of blood. Yeah, that's fine. How does one deal with purity days during the postpartum time in the Hanafi school? Are the days without any blood considered days of purity, or would they be considered part of the nifas? Similar to being in a period. So similar to being in a period, if you don't see, if you're not seeing any blood, you have to pray and fast. But if the blood comes back and it's within, there are certain more details to that, but if it's generally is within the 40 days, then that would be considered your period blood. Is it permissible to mix rulings? That follow that the period max is 10 days, but also follow Maliki opinion that bleeding past 10 days is istihala, and you don't consider it's permissible to mix like what the kind of rulings that I'm giving you. Like so because they're not mixing in such a way that it's like kind of not caring for the rule. If if you want to say bleeding past 10 days is istihala, you're not following the Hanafi ruling. You're definitely, because in the Hanafi fiqh is that, so in that sense, in your question that you asked right now, that's not possible, because that leads to completely disregarding the Hanafi ruling. So that sense, no, you can't. But there are there are other opinions you can. Okay. Oh, mashallah. Delirium, mashallah. Um, you want to post a survey? Sure, you can go ahead. When spotting outside the habit, do you have to do ghusl before each prayer? Spotting outside the habit. It depends. It depends, because you don't necessarily, if you spot outside your habit, that still can be your period, so it would be okay, right? So it depends. Okay, so right now, I'm going to give the mic to Sister Chantel, and okay, I know there is somebody who said had a question. Sister Chantel, can I take that question, or should I take it after your, yeah? Thank you. Who was that sister who had a question? Can you raise your hand? How am I going to find you? Let's see. There you are. Okay, you should be able to unmute.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Um, I would like to ask that recently, if like I was confused with it. It was 1 p.m. During the day when I got my period, but the Zuhr starts from 12. But
Mhm.
I didn't pray it because the time for Zuhr is still 3:15. So, what do I do with that Zuhr prayer? Like, do I have to do the qaza or just leave it or what?
So the bleeding started after Dhuhr started?
Af-
What time did the bleeding start?
After, yes, after the adhan was done.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it depends what madhab you follow. According to Hanafi, you don't have to make it up. If you're
Okay,
Hanafi, you don't have to make it up.
okay, jazakallah.
Barakallahu feek. Okay, inshallah. I'm going to bring on Sister Chantel. Like, she is the author of Peaceful Periods, and she is on she runs the Honored Womb, uh, and she does just a lot of holistic healing when it comes to period. If you have any period issues, for the fiqh, you go to a specialist, but if you have for the how to not have to go to a specialist and just inshallah have peaceful periods, you go to Sister Chantal. So this is her. Tafaddali. Inshallah, I'll mute you. Let me find you. Right. Bismillah. Okay.
Thank
Bismillah.
you. Yeah, I would say, well, thank you so much. I feel like classes like this just remind you how much you don't know and how much you need to study or know. Like once you realize like, oh, wait, maybe I missed that detail. And so I don't know if you said it clearly enough, but I want people to know that you are a specialist and that people can consult if they're having challenges within the Hanafi madhab. If you follow the Hanafi madhab, please don't overlook the resource that Sheikh Shaisa is for us. There are very few English speaking teachers that have studied Hanafi fiqh at such a high level of detail. And so she's such a accessible and wealth of knowledge to have in the community. So please take her classes. She teaches fiqh. If you want to know what's going on, she's someone to consult with. But I think exactly what you're saying, it's important that we know who to ask what questions. We don't go to the doctor for our fiqh questions. We go to a faqihah, we go to someone who has studied in this area. And similarly, if you actually want to address the issue, right? If you actually want to not just master how to manage your ibadah because of your irregular spotting, bleeding, and period challenges, but you actually want to address them, then you need to seek someone who can, support you in that. And I find it interesting because people will try to ask me fiqh questions, and I'm like, nope. Yes, I talk about periods, but know that we're talking about different topics here, right? You're telling me that you're spotting nonstop for days, for months, weeks, however long, and then you're asking me when to pray. That's when you talk to a specialist in fiqh, right? And oftentimes women will get their fiqh answered like, oh, okay. It's like, no, it's not okay yet. Yes, know what to do with your ibadah, but then let's dig a little bit deeper. Why are you spotting? Why are you bleeding more than 15 days every month? And so I think it can get confusing when we learn about menstruation through the lens of fiqh first, and we don't learn about menstruation as it is physiologically in our body. It can be really confusing because you're just like, oh, as long as it's less than the max 10 days or 15 days, it must be normal. But even still, bleeding that much for that long on a consistent basis is not what we would consider healthy. If you ask a conventional doctor, they may tell you that, oh, a normal period can range from every 16 days to 45 days. You could be bleeding like every 16 to 45 days. Like in terms of frequency, you could bleed from 2 to 7 days, 3 to 7 days. There's this wide range, but it's really important for us to get a sense of, well, what is actually a healthy period? What would a healthy period look like? And a healthy period wouldn't take you down this kind of rabbit hole of all of this nuance. Because ideally, what should we see? A monthly bleed that comes once a month. It starts, it progresses in a manageable manner, not heavy, not debilitating, not you're passing out, not you're losing consciousness, you can't get out of bed, right? We should see a healthy flow, because we need to consider that your period, imagine that your period is just your womb cleansing itself, right? Every organ cleanses itself. Your colon cleanses itself periodically. Your kidneys cleanse themselves periodically, and so does your womb. And so if we kind of consider that the womb just needs to do its periodic monthly cleansing, then it might attune us to be a bit more curious when we feel a lot of disruption. So for example, in the case of the colon, you know that I should be moving my bowels on a regular basis. I eat every day, so I should be eliminating every day. But if you're eliminating all day long, right, that should be cause for alarm. If you're not eliminating until 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, etc., that should be cause for alarm. And we're a bit more attuned to that. But with the womb and periods, sometimes we have this really confusing sense of what's normal, what's not normal, and what to do about it. So yes, study the fiqh, know how to manage your ibadah, but also get a little bit curious and a little bit deeper. So let's talk about what exactly is an optimal healthy period from a physiologic perspective. And what this is based on is the type of period that shows hormonal balance, that there's a appropriate concentration of hormones working together, and a type of menstrual cycle that has the highest chance of conceiving. So obviously, fertility is a really big topic, and people can conceive on many different types of period profiles and presentations, short, long, in between. But there is a type of period that has the highest chance of conceiving statistically. And this is also a period that doesn't show any apparent hormonal imbalances. And so what would this period look like? This would look like a period that comes every 28 to 30 days. So that means day one of your bleed. If you were counting day one of your bleed as day one, you would continue counting every day. And then when your period starts, that would be day one of the next menstrual cycle. So ideally, we want to be completing 28 to 30 days before we start to bleed again. So this is counting day one of one period to day one of the next. So that's how you count your period physiologically. Obviously, you have to keep your fiqh count. It'll be somewhat different. So when I say the first day of your period flow, I'm not talking about the first yellow spot or the first pink spot or spotting. This is the actual flow is when you need to use a period product. If you see color when you wipe, we wouldn't say that your flow has actually started. Your flow is established when you know that it's not just a wipe when I go to the bathroom. I actually need to put a period product on. I need to get a pad. I need to use something to catch this continuous flow. So that's how we consider it physiologically. But of course, your fiqh count is going to be a little bit different. So I'll say that again. Physiologically, your menstrual flow begins on the first day that you need a period product. That is day one of your flow. It does not count with days of spotting. Yellow and pink spotting before a flow is established is not considered your physiologic period, but keep track of it for your fiqh, your hayd is different, okay? And so what we should see ideally with this flow is that it begins with a red, fresh red color. So if you find that you're seeing brown at the start of your period, black at the start of your period, this is not fresh blood. And it tells us that there's some work that needs to be done here. So an optimal period would start with a red flow, right? It should start light and then up to medium and then medium down to light. And this optimal flow would be 4 days long. Now, again, waiting for tahara may take a little bit more time on the back end. And again, if you're counting your spotting on the front end, it's a little bit different. But the actual days that there's a flow exiting from your body and you're saturating and using period products, ideally, this would be a 4-day flow. This tells us that the hormone levels, the levels of estrogen you're making are adequate and that it's creating an adequate uterine lining, right? A healthy uterine lining if conception were to happen, and that it's shedding appropriately. We also would look for a flow that is not painful, right? When you have period pain, when you have cramping or clotting, this tells us that the flow of blood exiting the womb is a little bit slow and a little bit sluggish. So there's more work that we can do to improve the health of the menstrual flow. So again, this optimal period, this optimally balanced, hormonally balanced period is going to start red and end red. It's going to be a consistent flow for about 4 days. It'll come every 28 to 30 days. And we should see the flow going from light to medium, medium to light. A heavy period can tell us that something is a little bit off hormonally. We also want to see a flow that's steady. The consistency is not watery, like just flooding everywhere, nor is it thick and sticky. It would be like the consistency of maple syrup, just a steady flow. And we wouldn't see significant PMS or pains and challenges. Now, the reality is, like, the times we're living in are very hormonally challenging times. We're surrounded by, pesticides and herbicides in our foods. We're surrounded with plastic everything, right? It's hard to find anything that's not wrapped in plastic. There's even plastic on the receipts that we get from the supermarket. So it's very common for our hormones to be a little bit out of balance. So I'm not sharing this as a judgment of, oh, if your period is not like this, then something's wrong with you. However, it's an opportunity to realize, like, wow, I have to be conscious of how I'm protecting my period and protecting my hormonal health. It's not just wait to see what my period is like. Your period is just responding to you. Your period is telling you how the month has been, what you've been up to all month, having, what have you been eating? How have you been sleeping? How have you been taking care of yourself? How much inflammation is present in your body, right? How well are you prioritizing your needs? So consider that your period is just a mirror. It's just reflecting back to you. So many times we ignore our period, don't think about it until it comes, and then we're like, okay, let me deal with it now. But remember, your period is just reflecting back. How have you been caring for yourself? And so if you find that you tend to have really short menstrual cycles, or that you're bleeding abnormally, spotting in between periods, right? Having a lot of istihada very regularly, what you want to focus on in this case is taking a look at, one, if you're eating enough, right? For your body to have enough health and strength to close those uterine arteries so the bleeding can stop, or to close the cervix when the period is ending, you need to be feeding yourself enough. So if you're in a situation where you regularly skip meals, you skip breakfast, you say that you're intermittent fasting, or you're eliminating different food groups and having all of these dietary restrictions, you may not be giving yourself the substance that you need to build healthy hormonal levels. Did you want to say something, Ustada?
No, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was just actually telling my daughter to listen up.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, listen up. Because, our hormones, they don't just fall out of the sky. We build them, right? What we eat builds the quality of our hormones, right? Are we eating enough protein with every meal? Are we eating enough healthy fats, right? Cholesterol is a precursor for our hormones as well. So are we eating enough is a huge factor in having a healthy period, where you know that you're building enough blood so that you're not feeling depleted and drained and anemic every month, and that you are making good quality hormones so that you don't have these irregularities, right? Where estrogen and progesterone are just out of control. So that's the first thing to ask yourself. If you regularly have crazy spotting, lots of all over the place unpredictability, then how are you feeding yourself, right? Priority is to not skip your breakfast and center your meals around a protein source. My British sisters often tell me they have tea and toast for breakfast, and I'm like, where's the protein? Tea and toast is not going to do it, right? We need to pair carbs with protein and healthy fats, and that's how we feel satiated and full. So we're not just relying on sugar and coffee to get us through the day. And that's how we actually have the building blocks that our body needs to build the blood and the lining that we shed and make the hormones that we need. The other thing we need to really look at is, how are we resting? So if you are generally an exhausted person, you don't sleep well, you tend to stay up really late, or you don't have a consistent sleep schedule, this will also impact your hormones. Because rest is how our body tells us if we are managing stress well, and it's the major way we relieve stress. So yes, we might think of, oh, going to a gym or doing all of these things to relieve stress, but the biggest stress reliever that we have is rest, right? And knowing that rest is nourishment for our bodies, and intending rest as ibadah, it is something that builds our bodies. One thing we have to remember is that when we are in our childbearing years, whether we are married or not, or parents or not, our body is designed to cultivate life. And that doesn't mean just living at the edge of what you need to stay awake throughout the day, right? Living on the edge of what you need to function. Our bodies are very sensitive to stress and very sensitive to safety. And part of how our body knows that we are safe, so we can ovulate every month and we can have our monthly cycle in a healthy way, is that we're eating regularly and that we're sleeping regularly. So those are two major ways that we want to be really mindful of how we are taking care of ourselves. And then we also really want to, I do see the questions, I'll come to them. We also want to be mindful of our period care. What do you do when you actually are on your period? How do you care for yourself? every organ in the body, subhanAllah, has these optimal times. It's called biosynchronicity or something. It's a whole field of when's the optimal time that each organ works its best. And what we understand of the womb is that the womb needs its rest when it's shedding, when it is releasing that lining, when it's having that monthly bleed. And what you may find is if you really take great care of yourself when you're on your period. So what does that look like? That means resting, slowing down, not pushing yourself to the limit or to exhaustion, turning down the obligations that you really don't have. It also looks like feeding yourself well, because you are shedding and losing this extra blood that you've built up over the month, this extra lining that you've built over the month. So there is going to be some mineral loss. There is going to be some iron loss. So you want to be making sure that you're eating really well, particularly foods that are warm and foods that are well cooked. So they're really easy to digest. So when you're on your period, it's not salad and smoothie time, right? Those are great cleansing foods if you're trying to detox your body. But when we're bleeding, we're actually trying to replenish. We're trying to build our blood, build our strength, and replenish ourselves. And the best foods for that are going to be cooked foods, well-cooked foods. So think soups and stews and things that are really easy to chew and digest. And also with the idea of eating warm foods, those warming foods help to build our blood supply. They help to make sure we're not getting that sluggish period flow that's getting clotted, that's turning brown, that's giving us cramps. It helps to have this ease in how we are releasing our menstrual flow. So staying physically warm, drinking warm teas, eating warm foods that are easy to digest, and specifically leaning into iron-rich foods, right? Foods that have a high iron content for the blood loss that we experience. And then after looking at our period care, we just generally want to look at how are we taking care of ourselves? Because what will happen is that if we are feeling stressed out a lot, if we're in high stress situations regularly, our food is all over the place. Your body doesn't know when you're going to get a meal or when you're not. Your sleeping is all over the place. Don't know when you're going to get some rest. And if you're going to be disrupted, obviously there's times in our life where, that may be really natural if we have young children, and our bodies helps us adapt to that in that short period of time. But if you're just out of, a lack of consistency and a lack of self-care, if you're just all over the place, just grabbing food here, maybe I'll sleep, maybe I get enough rest, maybe I pull all-nighters, and you're all over the place, it's really hard for your body to know that you are safe enough, that you are healthy enough to have a regular bleed and have a healthy menstrual bleed. So you want to be really conscious that you're not so stressed out that your hormones your body just gets the memo that, look, you're not in a safe situation. So we're not going to ovulate consistently. Maybe we won't even ovulate at all, or your bleeding is just kind of all over the place. So as the hadith mentioned, right, not all bleeding is coming from the cervix. So just a little anatomy refresher, our uterus is our womb, right? And the neck, the gateway to the uterus, is our cervix. And the cervix, the same cervix we talk about opening at birth, it actually has to open a little bit to allow our period blood to come out. So the cervix opens a little bit to release our flow. And when that cervix opens, that's when that lining, and it's just a mucus lining. It's not like chunks of tissue. When there's clotting, that's not because the lining is just so difficult to get off. Like there's other things going on. Ideally, you should just have that little mucus lining just flowing out and coming out. If clots are forming, there's something else going on that we need to discuss. So imagine you have this monthly flow and then it ends. But sometimes we're still bleeding because the arteries are still open, right? Just like our Prophet ﷺ said, the uterine artery is still open. So for that uterine artery to have its ability to close, there needs to be enough strength in the body, right? There needs to be enough tone in the arteries. And so sometimes we need to give our body strength by eating well, by sleeping well. And the third is by taking advantage of herbs that help to bring tone and strength to our uterine arteries, okay? So there are a couple of herbs. If you tend to be a really heavy bleeder, and I'll also put them in the chat, if you tend to bleed very heavily or you tend to spot a lot in between periods. Some of the herbs you want to consider taking on a regular basis would be red raspberry leaf. Right, red raspberry leaf is a uterine tonic, so it has an affinity for the uterus. It helps to bring tone and strength specifically to our pelvic space, to the uterus, and to the arteries in the uterus. So red raspberry leaf is a uterine tonic that you should know of. If you tend to bleed heavy and for very long, then you want to befriend yarrow tea. Yarrow tea is a anti-hemorrhagic. So what that means is that it will discourage your body from bleeding too heavily. So yarrow tea is another, yarrow is the herb, and you can have it as a tea. You can also probably find it as a tincture, but that's another herb that helps to slow down bleeding. And if you find that you're really bleeding, like hemorrhaging, bleeding way too long, then other more potent herbs in that realm would be an herb called shepherd's purse and lady's mantle. And these herbs are so powerful that even midwives would use it at births traditionally to stop a woman who's having postpartum hemorrhaging. So if you've thought, oh, after birth, if there's a hemorrhage, you need Pitocin. Before Pitocin, women had herbs, and this is what they use. So these are also anti-hemorrhagic herbs. If you find that you're bleeding, right, if you're having this extended bleeding, your other best ally is bed rest, right? Actually take the weight and pressure off of your arteries by laying down and resting as much as possible, right? Have some boundaries, set some boundaries and say no when you can and ask for help. If you tend to be a person who has to do it all on your own, then it's really hard to give your body the care it needs to be well, to be strong, and to close those arteries, support that cervix and closing appropriately, and just make overall healthy hormones. So those are the key herbs that can you find all of those in a local, if you have access to a health food shop or a shop like Whole Foods or Sprouts, very likely that they'll have red raspberry leaf and yarrow for sure. If you're in a tropical place, guava leaf as well is a really good, guava leaf is an anti-hemorrhagic as well. So if you are actively bleeding for too long, you've gone past 4 days of a flow and the flow is still just going and going nonstop, then yes, you can take these teas. Red raspberry leaf is a tonic, so you can drink it regularly, and yarrow as well. Yarrow can be had regularly, but usually when we're trying to slow down or stop heavy bleeding, we would drink up to 3 cups a day, like you would drink more consistently throughout the day, those particular herbs. But then bed rest is also the best thing to do. So I'll take a look at so the first question I saw was that the doctor always says clots are less than a quarter size are okay. A clot in any part of your body, any size, is not considered okay. So why are we told that it's okay in your uterus to have a clot, right? Like a clot in any part of the body, clots can move. Right. So it's very common. I think that's a more accurate thing to say. It's very common for people to have clots. Most people don't see it as a major red flag to have clots that are smaller than a quarter size. But ideally, we shouldn't see clots. Like we should see that as something that we track. If it's getting worse, then track that and pay attention and start thinking about changes you can make. And if you're seeing less, then you're moving in the right direction. So pay attention to your bleed. So yes, what color you're bleeding and what days you're bleeding, but also pay attention to the changes that you notice month to month and what changes you see when you try taking new teas, when you start prioritizing self-care, when you start adding more rest to your diet, to your lifestyle. Yes, the session's being recorded. So protein, I generally, for adult women, the 25 to 30 grams is pretty typical. For my daughter, who's a teenager and she's menstruating, I definitely try to make sure that she's getting around like kind of 16 to 20 grams of protein at each meal. Her appetite, it just depends. I try to really make sure that she's getting in a good solid protein source and really build that as a habit for her. What does feeding yourself well mean? A lot of people eat well equals eat a lot. So that's the thing, right? We want to be nourished, not just full. So you can get a good sense of what a nourishing meal is that it gives you energy when you're done. You don't feel weighed down and heavy. I remember when I was in college, I could never study after a meal. And I realized it was because I was just eating really poorly. So I just had no energy. So a nourishing meal should actually revitalize you. You should feel your energy pick up without feeling sluggish, bloated, gassy, and what have you. And it also should be a meal that keeps you satisfied for at least 4 hours. If you eat something and you're snacky 2 hours later or 1 hour later, or you feel like I just need something sweet, more than likely that meal didn't balance your blood sugar well enough to keep you going until the next meal. So ideally, a really well-balanced meal that has a really clear protein source, some slow burning carbs. So as much as possible, carbs that help to keep your blood sugar stable for a longer period of time. So whole grains when you can, or sweet potatoes, and just really being creative about how you put carbs into your diet. You can get a lot of carbs from veggies as well. And healthy fats help to kind of sustain your blood sugar for a longer time. So eating well would feel good, right? Don't just think, like this meal is so good. How do I feel in the moment as I'm eating it? Check in with yourself 30 minutes after that meal, an hour, 2, 4, 5. And if you find like, wow, like that kept me full and energized until the next meal, then that's a good sign that you're on the mark. What happens if you have to take antibiotics for another health issue and that affects your period flow? How can that be managed? It depends on how it's affecting your flow. And long-term antibiotics is really something that you want to, it's going to take a lot of care because it just, antibiotics, it just kills, all of your bacteria. So you have to be really conscious of putting in good bacteria in your body, probiotics, either through foods or supplements. Sister Chantal, thank you for talking about eating right. Changed my diet to LCHF in the summer. What's LCHF? Ended up with bleeding in between periods around ovulation. Oh, okay. Yeah, not good. Got stressed out because of it, but increased my carb intake, not to go into ketosis, and saw that it got better. Hoping that it will be completely fixed this month, inshallah. Thank you for sharing. Alhamdulillah. Yep. Pay attention. You might say, like, I'm going to do keto because I want to lose this weight. Watch your period. Your period will tell you how that diet is working for you. If your period goes away, that's a sign. Pay attention. If your period comes heavier, earlier, pay attention. Your body, your period is your fifth vital sign, so it is communicating to you. So if you tend to have a lot of spotting, you might want to consider taking those tonic herbs every day. Some other tonic herbs would be ashwagandha and shatavari if you're familiar with Ayurvedic herbs. But again, this is imagine this talk is really just an appetizer, right? There's so much more to learn, and know that you are worth investing in your knowledge. You are worth investing in knowing the fiqh of your menstruation. You are worth knowing how to have a healthy, peaceful period. I find that many women have a hard time investing in this kind of knowledge because it's like, well, it doesn't make me more money, or it doesn't help my kids. Yes, it does help your kids. It doesn't help my family. It helps your husband too, right? Your whole family benefits when you have more balanced hormones and more peace within your body. Everyone will benefit, and your benefit is worth it, even if no one else benefits. What causes spotting and dark blood before the period? Poor circulation and blood clots during the period. So more warmth, more circulation, and that can look like having a womb massage practice, massaging your womb, heating pads, warm teas, avoiding cold foods, frozen foods, etc. A womb steaming practice. And if that's new to you, then you can come to my site or page and learn a lot more about that. Can we buy the herbs as tea bags, or does it have to be? You can I wouldn't buy them in tea bags. If you're making tea to drink, yes, tea bags are fine. But loose is fine. It doesn't have to be fresh. Chase and Vitex, it's helpful for some people. Chaseberry and Vitex, it's really helpful for some people, especially with PMS. So each meal, 30 is ideal, aiming for 30 grams of protein. So for example, many women, when they'll tell me, oh, I eat eggs for breakfast, it's like, okay, well, how many eggs are you eating? Oh, I eat one. Okay, well, one egg is like 6 grams of protein. So you're going to have to like triple up on the eggs, maybe add some, cheese or some meat or some yogurt, think about kind of building that out a little bit more. irregular periods for 16-year-olds. So if they've been, it's really the challenge with teenagers, I find, is that you really have to support them in having healthy eating and sleeping habits. If they're not eating and sleeping well, it's really going to be hard for them to have healthy periods. And then what I also do is just I slip teas in everywhere. Oh, hey, here's some tea. Here, drink some tea. So I'm like constantly making herbal tea for my daughter and having her like get those tonics and that nutrition from herbal teas are really good. Making wholesome meals, and really, I remember as a teen having horrible periods, and I really, I missed breakfast a lot. I ate a lot of really bad foods because I had to, I was living in Queens, like Sheikh Shaista and I are from Queens, New York. I used to take the city bus to school. I used to have to like leave before the sun came up. There was no time for breakfast, walking, it was a lot. So I would say the best thing you can do for your teen is really try to cultivate good, healthy eating habits. Don't have junk around in the house. They're going to find the junk outside the house. Trust me. Don't have junk in the house, and try to really find the most nourishing meals that they really enjoy, and lean into more of that. Oh, low carb, high fat. Yeah. A lot of the diet trends are tested on men's bodies, so they don't really serve women in the same way, or they work for like half the month. And then after we ovulate and we're in our luteal phase, it's disastrous. So our eating the same way every single day for a female body will always have its shortcomings, because we need more calories after we ovulate. And we might be needing more of those easier to digest foods. There's a way to adjust how you're eating to support your hormones as well. How best can we change our diet so that we can ovulate naturally? It depends why you're not ovulating. So if it's stress, then you got to work on your sleep and stress management. If you're not eating enough food, if you have issues with food, then upping your fat and upping your protein are really important if you're trying to ovulate naturally. And having regular rhythms in your life helps your ovulation to have a regular rhythm. So a routine of eating, a routine of sleeping. Try to really acclimate your body to a natural like movement throughout your day, more or less as much as you can. Supplements for a 28-year-old for a healthy period and fertility. It depends how they're eating. They say that the quality of our food is such that it's really hard to get all of our nutrients. I really like whole food based supplements. I don't like synthetic supplements. So if it's coming from a food source, so there's some brands like, I don't know if it's Garden of Life. If you look up, I prefer whole food supplements because they come from real foods. They're not just manufactured, but don't let them substitute like the quality of food you're eating, just to kind of fill in any gaps that might be around the edges. That's how I look at it. If I see spotting a lot on long periods, shall I take those herbs every day? Yeah, you can. I would say try it out and see. We have to start getting really curious about studying ourselves too. So try those herbs and see what's working for you. I think this needs, yeah, that's my goal. That's why I wrote a whole book. So I'd love to see it as the curriculum in many schools. Herbs to help with extreme period pain, consistent vomiting, and diarrhea. So there are herbs that help with period pain. Red raspberry leaf is also a good one. Fresh ginger is found to be as effective, if not more, than ibuprofen. So making freshly grated ginger tea, turmeric. You need to really turn down the inflammation, right? Pain is often inflammatory. So what's going to turn down the inflammation? But again, it's not going to be what's that one herb in the time of crisis. It's like, what is the lifestyle behind it? How am I supporting myself throughout the month? Heavy bleeding can indicate low progesterone. Sometimes premature bleeding can show low progesterone. Like if you're starting to spot before your period is due, sometimes there's not enough progesterone to keep a period in place. What does a light period mean? If you have a flow that's less than 3 days. Some women don't even saturate a pad, right? There is such a thing as too much bleeding, and there is such a thing as not enough bleeding. So I would say a light period, in one sense, you could say a light period is like a pink flow. It's not really a robust red, or it's less than 3 days, like you maybe bleed 1 or 2 days and it's over. Protein shakes. Yeah, you can do whey protein. You could do protein shakes to get in 30 grams. It's a way of life, really. It really is a total shift, because when you start to really count the nutrients, it's like, oh, well, we don't really get as much protein as we need. But yeah, you can do that or just diversify. Like Greek yogurt has a lot of protein, so throw that in. Throw in some nuts and seeds when you can. Womb steaming herb recommendation. For womb steaming, it depends what's going on. It depends what your period is like. What teas do you have your daughter drink? A lot of red raspberry leaf. Alhamdulillah. I think so. And I get her to steam. I kind of force her to sometimes. I'm like, look, if you want me to support you when you're having difficulty, you want to get a day out of school when you have your period, you need to listen, right? You want me to lighten up on chores, then follow my recommendations. So we got to do our steaming. So yeah, teenagers can steam as well. And it knocks out cramps so well. It's so effective. I feel like teen bodies are so adaptive because they're still growing. If they won't drink hot tea, well, I wouldn't do cold tea on their period, but you can certainly make like iced tea when they're not on their period with herbs. So like hibiscus makes a really nice herbal tea. You can put red raspberry leaf and lemon and, do the whole thing. But when they're bleeding, when they're actually on their bleed, yeah, hot would be hot, warm, not iced if you can. Not many men are educated. Yeah, what does thin dark blood indicate? That last 7, thin dark blood. Sounds like some spotting. Like if the blood is dark at the end, yeah, there's some stagnation there too. I do have something, if I can share the screen, I'm not sure. Can you, I'll just, I have a download
Yeah,
that you can, thank you.
let me make sure you can share.
I think I have to be co-host. Treating brown blood, you just want to get blood moving, right? Get the blood moving, get circulation moving. So you can, yes, vitamin D is great for everyone, especially if you cover and you don't spend a lot of time outside. Vitamin D is great. Another secret to getting in more vitamin D is free range eggs. If eggs are outside under the sun, then their eggs have more vitamin D. So that's like a little hack you might want to consider investing. It's an investment, but so worth it. I would say, can we share? Let me try. As for brown blood, yeah, just more warmth. Warm yourself. Not yet. I think you have to stop your screen from sharing. And I'll just put up a link. There's a womb health checklist that I put together. So if you are needing a little bit more support, I will, it's here at the end. I just decided to talk through instead of going through the slide. But here you can, so if you're really unsure about like where you're at with your womb health, and is your womb healthy and fertile and what have you, this is a checklist that you can download, and it's just some good cues, and it's really helpful for you to know what to move towards. So what kind of cervical mucus or vaginal discharge would be a sign of good health? What color, what consistency, what symptoms, like, all of these things together. You can download this for free, and it'll also put you on my mailing list so you'll know what I'm offering in the future. You can also learn more about womb steaming. Some of you asked at honoredwomb.com, and also my book is available on my website, honoredwomb.com. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Ustadha. Jazakallah khair. Thanks for having me.
Jazakallah khairan to you, and mashallah, it was so every time it's I just feel like it's so informative. Jazakallah khairan. And yes, inshallah, the session was recorded, and I am doing a class soon on basic fiqh, and I call it like a mother-daughter class, which so it's for older women and for younger women. And I actually saw that when I did an older woman's class, I saw it's easier for everybody when I have the younger girls because the fiqh can get so complicated. It's best to keep it really simple. And when I have the younger girls there, the language I do use is simple, and it helps everybody. So it's a bit, I've seen, but I do a special session for the women. to give them some fit on intimacy and things like that, which is of course very important. It's haram, of course we know it's not allowed to be intimate during that time. So it's important for women to know when that starts and when that stops, etc., etc. So that has a special session. But please, so in general, the class is like Hanafi, but it is really intended to cater to women, to cater to women's needs. And it's intended to cater to be like basic fiqh that you can actually use practically. And that's my intention with this time, especially, so if there are, just like I, kind of did here, I don't want it to be confusing, but I want it to be serving. I want it to be serving whatever, if there's things that are difficult for women having spotting a lot, or that, alhamdulillah, I have the ability to take from to give another fatwa there. So inshallah, hopefully with this class you get like the basics that you need to hopefully be able to take care of yourself. And of course, if you want to teach and learn, that's another thing, that's many more sessions. But for yourself, to take care of yourself, inshallah, this class will help with that. Inshallah, the recording will be sent out once it's uploaded. And Chantal, you put your website up there, inshallah. So thank you all for attending, and inshallah, we look forward to, inshallah, seeing you again in other sessions soon, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan to you, Chantal. And it was so it's so enlightening. There's one thing, but I'm so glad you said okay to the protein shake. Shake, not shake, the protein shake, because I actually I just started realizing how little protein I get, and I just ordered mine like 2 weeks ago. And then I'm like, I don't know, I've never had that before, but yeah, I just and when I was reading, it was like 20, it only has, I think, 25 grams. I was like, that's not enough. But so I was only taking half a serving, but I realized I do need to take more in terms of, even if I have a full serving of it, it's still like there's still so much more protein I need. And that's been a real struggle for me to get enough protein. I'm like, you have, and I feel like, how do you balance that with I'm sorry, I was gonna end it, but I realized I have this issue right here. And I'm like, how do you balance like taking more protein without like eating so much more and going like so many more calories? Okay, like cheese, a lot of that is very high calorie. I guess, the Greek yogurt would be low calorie, but the nuts as well. I feel like it's like the recommendation is like very little, but if you start eating a lot of nuts, that's also, it's very easy, like I feel like, to gain weight if you get protein in the wrong places. So yeah, mashallah, that's been a challenge for me, but alhamdulillah, so I'm glad.
And I think one thing I'll add is that I remember coming into, like when I started studying, and I would hear all of these references to, the one who eats a lot, sleeps a lot, the one who sleeps a lot, misses a lot, like drinks a lot, and then the one who drinks a lot misses a lot. And I remember having like, I had to also really remember that like I have a female body and I have a womb that nourishes life. And so when you're feeding yourself, like just to really take that intention that I'm nourishing the life that I could potentially carry, like this is just part of, I think we do have a unique path. And so if your relationship with food has been, if you've been struggling with like allowing yourself to feel really well nourished, know that our bodies are the unique bodies that carry life and nourish other children, right? Nourish babies and make milk and what have you. So try not to be too like ascetic. Try not to have too much zuhud in these childbearing years, because you'll end up depleted. And what you're not taking in, your babies will literally take from your brain, blood, and bones. Like literally, they will extract. And we want to be robust worshipers, right, into our elder years. And so, so just take your zuhud with like in moderation and balance. Know where you are in your stage of life. If you are a mother, if you want to be a mother, if you are menstruating and bleeding every month, intend that rest and that care of your womb as ibadah, right? Like you're in a special place in your life, and you're not going to be menstruating and childbearing forever, right? So you can get back to that zuhud when you after menopause, when the periods are over and the breastfeeding and the baby making is over, like, you know, your path will, you'll be well prepared for that time, inshallah. So don't
Okay.
neglect yourself.
You know, I still struggle with that. I'll be honest. I struggle with the sleeping and with the eating. And just when you were talking about not missing breakfast, that's when I looked at my daughter because we're both guilty of that. I'm like, you know, and well, especially since for the winter months, we started our like back-to-back fasting because I'm like, I have so many fasts that I want to make up. But I'm just wondering if you know, like how to, you know, that we perhaps, you know, a day here, a day there. But yeah, and also just this idea of just our worship and that zuhud. And I see it in the seerah, by the way, you know, in terms of the hadith, like there's a hadith of a Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he says, who will wake the companions of the rooms, meaning the sahibat hujarat, the women, the wives, meaning they're sleeping while he's awake, right? And for me, I'm like, okay, so women do get more sleep, but I still have this like from my teachers as well. They're such mashallah, they're some of them are so like they're just like powering through and like with little sleep. And so I have this concept, but it is something that I feel it is important to highlight that women do have a different body, and from that is that self-care, preserving that body and honoring that is from ibadah too. I think it's important, and that's something I have to teach myself first, and I'm guilty of it.
Mm.
Jazakallah khair, and thank you
And
for
it's both,
that.
right? Because there is that barakah too. There are some people like, I don't know what you're floating on. Like you're fueled by something otherworldly, and that is nourishing too. So I think it's just, yeah, holding the two, inshallah, like nourishing our bodies, right, as the amana. And then also, you know, Allah will, I believe that spiritual sustenance will come when we need it too. Alhamdulillah,
Yeah,
but yeah,
definitely. There is like, you know, the people of like tahajjud and stuff like that. They have like they have a fuel that is different. It's like you don't get that from protein shakes.
But your naps, if you're gonna do, you know, stay up for qiyam al-layl and your tahajjud, like make time for those naps. Like we have to put that back into
Oh yeah.
balance too, right?
Well, that
Like,
is from the Sunnah. That is from
yes,
the Sunnah. So
exactly.
yeah, I'm so pro Sunnah naps. Jazakallah khairan. It's been such a pleasure. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you for
Alhamdulillah.
all for attending. And we'll end by saying Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.